Today I'm going to give you a quick masterclass on the virtue of tolerance. And tolerance is something that, Christians teach, and it's a Christian teaching, sure, but tolerance is something you have to be very careful with. So I'm going to go through that. I'm going to break it down. I'm going to break through the good things of it, and I'm also going to break down the bad parts of it. So that is what this episode is going to be about in this mini virtue series, where I'm going to be talking about the virtue of tolerance. And whether or not it is actually a virtue, I don't even know, to be honest with you. I think it is. I think there are so many good things with tolerance, but you have to be careful. It's unique. It's unique to the other virtues in the sense that it's like the other virtues, of course, in all circumstances, you want every single one of the other virtues: patience, courage, strength, wisdom. But tolerance is something maybe you don't want in every single life situation, and I'll tell you why. So, to start, here are the good things of tolerance, right? In life, as a Christian, you're going through it. There'll be people you disagree with. There'll be people that piss you off. There'll be people that make you angry. Tolerance is basically to say that you don't let it affect you. To tolerate someone or something is to not let it affect you, not make it so that you have self-control. You don't lash out at them. You don't say something you might regret or do something you might regret at people that you disagree with, or at people that are being annoying or that are being stupid, that are treating you poorly. And tolerate it is to say, you turn the other cheek, right? Someone treats you poorly, someone hurts you, you turn the other cheek. You don't hurt back, you don't insult them back. And that's a good, noble thing to do, and that's an amazing part of that Christian teaching. And that is why tolerance is taught. And that is why it is a virtue, because of exactly that thing, that what Jesus said, right? To turn the other cheek, to love your enemy. So it's important in that aspect that yes, in this world, in this life, there will be people that make you mad, that say something or do something to hurt you on purpose. And tolerance is to say that you can tolerate it, and instead of lashing out, to be controlled in yourself, to not fight back, right? Instead of fighting back, to in a respectful manner, teach them a better way through Christ, right? And through that tolerance is where you can show immense strength. Because if someone literally punches you in the face but you turn the other cheek, it just kind of confuses them, right? Because the natural human instinct is to just kind of either fight back or run away or something, right? But if you purposefully, in whether this is the actual physical altercation or metaphorical thing, if you just turn the other cheek, and you get hit in the face, but then you say, okay, punch me again, but on this side this time. Like if you literally go and do that, unless the person's actually like just crazy half their mind, which is some people. But like if they're actually a person with a conscience, with morals, they'll like look at that, and they'll like kind of stun them. They'll be shocked, because no one really expects anyone to actually do that, right? But that is tolerance. That is tolerance. You're tolerating that first punch to say, all right, do it again, man. Punch me again. Because that's the ultimate, silencer, right? Is to turn the other cheek in a moment of adversity, in a moment of people, actually hurting you. So that's where tolerance is good. And, of course, another thing where tolerance is good is stress tolerance, stress management. In life, there's many stresses, whether it be stresses inflicted onto you by other people, or just stresses of life, like just you're going through things, or things are just unlucky. I don't know, things happen by chance to create certain situations. Stress is important, because I think the more stress you can tolerate, the better you will do in your life. Because life is hard, right? It's not meant to be easy. It's not made to be easy. If it was easy to make it as a successful thing in a big pursuit, if it was easy, everyone would want to do it. But, there are easy paths to life that are just kind of there. But the tougher paths of life, and even in the easy paths of life, not everything's going to be smooth sailing. There'll be good moments and bad through it all, no matter what path you decide to go on. So it's like, with that in mind, you need to have a level of tolerance in terms of tolerating those things, those unexpected setbacks, those moments, those stresses, those things you couldn't have calculated, you couldn't have realized were going to happen to you. Tolerance in that sense, the stress tolerance, is actually something that is very important, very useful, very noble. very just real, right? Very useful in your life to be tolerant of stress. So these are where tolerance as a virtue is super powerful, super useful to your life, is to tolerate stress, to tolerate, other people, whether it be physical or emotional, psychological, insulting, mental hurt, right? Bullying or whatever. To tolerate it is to not let it affect you. To tolerate it is to basically, shrug it off, turn the other cheek, or just move on entirely and move on to different things. Try and teach them the way. Some people are going to be closed-minded, close their hearts. That's okay. You don't have to take that personally. You just got to move on, right? And that's the great thing about tolerance. It gives you that kind of laissez-faire, I don't really care type of attitude. And that's an important thing. That's a skill that's super important in certain situations. Of course, you don't want to you want to have a lot of care to certain things in your life, but when it comes to the stupidities of other people, things you can't really control, all that kind of stuff, to tolerate it and to tolerate that stress is super good. But here's why you have to be a little bit careful. Here's why you have to be a little bit mindful when it comes to tolerance, the virtue of tolerance. Basically, tolerance in this world, from the grand scheme of things, is a big reason why Christianity is kind of laughed at. Why there are so many lukewarm Christians, people that don't actually pay attention to the faith, and people that are so progressive and inclusive in all of this. That's over tolerance, which is very real and very true, right? Why do you think Muslim countries are, some of the most safe and successful countries out there? Right? Why do you think Dubai is like the hub for rich people to go and experience and explore and live? It's because they have a model. I personally don't agree with that model, but it's a model that they stick to and they don't change. But whereas us traditionally Christian countries in the West have changed that to be inclusive of other people, so people don't actually have to assimilate into the culture. You have multiculturalism, and it is something that as a Christian country, which we don't really identify as that anymore, but based on the foundations, pretty much every country in the West is a Christian country on the foundations, and 95% of them don't actually stick to Christian values, and they're not actually hard and strong on Christian values. There's a few countries in the middle in the Eastern Europe that are still very strictly Christian, but those countries are also very poor. Like, those countries actually don't have a booming, thriving economy. So, you don't really want to live in a lot of those places. But in terms of, the bigger countries, the countries that do have good economies, at least for now, we've moved away from those values. And that's why Christianity at times is scoffed at. Not because of the teaching of Christ, but because of what we as Christians have decided to do, which was to be too open-minded, to be too inclusive. And as a result, you have our culture not really being a thing. There's no real culture, right? When it comes to, what does it say? What do you mean? What does it mean to be Canadian? Like maple syrup and hockey and whatever, like, and curling and snow, like, that's Canadian, right? I guess there's some to it, and there's a little bit more than America, I guess, because you have that, the binding aspect of the fact that it's just super cold in this country, at least. But the point is, it's like there's no deep spiritual value uniting us either. There's definitely nothing uniting the U.S. But with Canada, it's the same type of issue as well. And I'm not going to get into the geopolitical and crazy implication of all of it. But the point is that more and more people are living without God, and more people are living in misery. And that is a fact, just each and every day, because they don't have that higher power. They're living in themselves. They're living in the selfishness, and there's nothing fulfilling about that. And the only reason all of that's come about is because we have been so open as society, as a Christian society, Christian nation. We've been too open and too tolerant to all of these different changes, and to multiculturalism, and to immigration, and to all of this stuff. I'm not saying those things are bad, but I'm saying that we have taken it too far. We have not put our foot down. We have not set a line, a standard. These Muslim countries have set their line and their standard, and that's why their faith is strong, right? And their success is real and tangible to see. Even if I don't agree with their ways, right? But that is where tolerance, in the grand scheme of things, is something that is truly bad, and it's something that really, like, how are you going to spread God's word, right? As Christians, just by definition, we believe that Christ is the Lord and Savior, and we believe that it is only through Him that we may be saved. And, well, I personally think that the power that He instilled on this planet and the influence He has makes it even more real. And of course, reading the Bible helps truly see how many references are made, how much historical significance is actually there with the truth of this entire claim, more than any other religion. But, like, how are you supposed to tell people that and teach people that and have that be a thing if your entire society is actually not really based off of it anymore? Like the values that started most of the countries in the West are not really, remembered for what they are. They're founded on predominantly Christian values. Like, you have people in the U.S. trying to like kind of sway the narrative, let's say, and try and skew the facts. But the fact is, the Constitution was made up of Christian values. It was Christian values that was the foundation for how they developed that entire country. As much as people want to say otherwise, it's just the truth. You can look into it. Canada, I'm not so sure, but I'd imagine it's the same. I imagine it's a similar thing. I don't really know, but it's like, that's okay. I don't really have to know. It's not really that big of a deal. The point is, how are you supposed to spread the faith if there's more people living in the country that are not Christian than are Christian? Like, I mean, I don't know the stats, but I can probably infer and assume that that's the case, that there's more non-Christians than Christians in this country right now. So with that in mind, it's like, well, what? Christianity is just going to die off, right? Eventually. And why is that? It comes down ultimately to the fact that throughout the years we have been too tolerant as Christians, as like a society of Christian people, where now there are so many people that are living lives without God at all, or living with, what we would say are the wrong values. And in this multiculturalism, this progressiveness, this acceptance has kind of caused Christianity to have this level of kind of this inferred like non-dominance, and this inferred kind of just scrutiny. That's a good word, because of the way that we've been too tolerant. So understand that in your life, that is a thing that can happen. You become too tolerant. And then if you're too tolerant, you allow things and accept things that really you shouldn't allow. There should be a line, and there should be somewhere where you put your foot down in terms of like what people say to you and what things happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if someone tells you, I don't know, if there's like an intellectual atheist, one of those guys, and they're being incredibly angry at you, saying, "Oh, Jesus doesn't exist, blah 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 blah, it's whatever fairy tale, whatever, God is a fairy tale," which is what they like to say. If you're tolerant and you just say, "All right, yeah," it could lead you to say, "Oh, I understand your opinion. I can understand where that comes from," and you'll push back, right? And that's you allow that type of stuff to be there, and that just creates a negative society. It creates a bad life for you and for the people around you. So there has to be somewhere where you put your foot down the line and you actually, talk about the gospel. You teach the Bible. You let people know that, God is real and God exists and His name is Jesus Christ. There's a level where you have to put your foot down there, and a lot of people don't have that level. They don't put that foot down, and tolerance can fall into that, where you're tolerant of everything. And when you're tolerant of everything, that means you have no values. That means there is nothing to stand on. So that means, like, your actual Christian faith, there's nothing to stand on. But that's not down to Jesus. That's not down to what He did. That is down truly to you and your values of the way you see tolerance, the way you see inclusion and progressiveness. So understand that. And I'm going to conclude with this, after having explained all that. Hopefully I explained it well. if you've got any questions, let me know in the comments. Of course, I will answer them. I will debate you. I will, talk about things, especially if you disagree. If you disagree in a respectful way, I'll talk about it. If you disagree in a hateful way, I'm not going to allow the hate. I'm just going to delete your comment. But we can disagree and we can, bounce ideas off each other in a respectful, truly, truly civil manner. So comment if you have any questions, if you have any disagreements, anything that you want to let me know, and I'll be sure to respond. I'll be sure to let you know, and I'll be sure to kind of expand on what I'm talking about today if I didn't really explain in a proper way, but I think I did well. The conclusion is this, that there is a place for tolerance. Tolerance is talked about because you have to turn the other cheek in a lot of situations. There's a lot of stresses in life that you have to be tolerant of. There's a lot of people that are going to piss you off that you have to be tolerant of, because you can't let it affect your mental state. You cannot let it affect your mood, because that'll just, lead you to having a worse day or a worse week. And if you let, if you're not tolerant enough of these people, if you let one bad experience ruin your entire week, then that's just going to lead you to, a lot of misery, because you're going to have that type of extremism, highs and lows, right? The highs will become so high, the lows will become so low, even if it's not something that should be that low. So tolerance is that regulator in the fact that you don't let it affect you. So that in those situations is where it can be very good. But when it comes to the grand scheme of society and the way we spread Christianity and Christian values and the way we stand on them, is where tolerance can get very bad, because you become too tolerant. You can become too tolerant and too progressive and too inclusive to other people, that your actual initial faith in Christian values get completely squashed and slowly die out because of your over tolerance. So there's a point in everything that you have to put your foot down. You have to, you have to have a line. And that line is basically the set of values you live your life by. Tolerance is good in smaller situations, in just kind of generally you living a better life. But you have to understand that there is a level where you can go too far. So you have to be very careful when asking God for tolerance. Be very careful, because there are moments where you can go too far, and we've seen in society today why many things have gone too far and things are not moving in a great direction because of it. So that's it. Final message, stay positive, right? Stay positive. There are more people turning to Christianity, turning to God than ever before. More people, in the Gen Z bracket, deciding that, what the millennials have done in terms of their beliefs in God. In terms of that, we've decided to make a different switch and have a different idea that they don't have, that they never had. And God's been pushed out of society, but a lot of people are bringing it back in, bringing God back into this world, which is amazing. Like, it being the faith and the belief. God, of course, is the ultimate being. So be positive. Tolerance is also the idea that you don't let people shake your positive mindset. You stay positive even if people are trying to break you and trying to make you feel like crap. Keep that positive mindset, and the tolerance will help you get there. But always set a line, right? There has to be that line. There has to be that line where you're firm. You become more firm with your values and you put your foot down. Otherwise, tolerance becomes something too bad that will really destroy society in the long run if we as Christians don't fix it, right? Don't fix the issues that kind of we set by being too tolerant of other people. So that is it. That is the virtue of tolerance. So truly, when you think about tolerance, think of it in a different way from the other virtues, that there is good in it and there is also bad in it. All the other virtues is pretty much all good. There's really no downside to being a courageous, strong, wise, and patient person, right? But tolerance, there is that level of downside if you take it too far. So understand that. And use it and apply it in your life. Truly try and be a better person every day, and find a place for tolerance, and find that hard line for yourself, for your values, that you put your foot down on when someone tries to cross it or go too far.